Just want to say, first of all, thank you for coming out today. I apologize for the delay and for the few days that we've not really been able to do this. I'm still currently active military orders at Fort McClellan, so I had to come back and handle a few things today so we could do this, and had to get really into the details of the case. I am informed of things when I'm away, but a lot of times I don't get all of the in the weeds type stuff. So I had to sit down and really look at it today and get all of the details and talk to the investigators to make sure that I wasn't going to put out something that he didn't want me to put out. Because this is still an ongoing investigation, and as of right now they're charged but are not convicted, so we still have to protect evidence as much as we can when it comes to statements and things of that nature. But I do want to address the case where a young child, the age of 4 years old, was wounded in a house in the Sugarland Lake area, and that address is 502 Holiday Drive in Oneonta. We have two subjects that we currently have custody in our jail: Alexander Corey and Cassandra Lynn Lutz, the parents of the child who was injured during this incident. I'll give you just a brief synopsis if that's okay, and at the end, if you have some questions, I'll do my best to answer those questions. Some things I won't be able to answer, some things I'll do my best, and then some things I'll have to defer to another agency, and we'll talk about that briefly in just a moment. But on the date of on the 4th of this month, at approximately 7:30 hours in the morning, one of my patrol sergeants, Sergeant Holloman, received a call from dispatch stating that there was a 4-year-old child at the emergency room with a gunshot wound, or a possible gunshot wound. Sergeant Holloman notified the investigator that works that area. His name is Sergeant Jared Eakes. He's the criminal investigator who covers that area specifically. Sergeant Eakes went to the hospital to make contact with the victim, and while he was there, he also made contact with our two suspects that we have in custody today. Sergeant Hull was also informed. He is the investigator that works for the sheriff's office that handles, his sole responsibility is crimes against women and children. And so he was also notified and has been very active in the investigation of this case. Sergeant Eakes, when he went to the hospital, he spoke to both the offenders and to the victim to try to understand what was going on and what had happened. When Sergeant Eakes arrived at the hospital, he did speak to a charge nurse who advised him that the mother was in the hospital with the child, yelling at him, making statements like, "See, this is what happens when you play with guns." The child did have a belt tied around his arm, acting as a tourniquet, but he also had a wound in his leg where there was nothing on his leg wound at the time. And the nurse at that time did not know if he had been shot once or twice, but indeed he had been shot once and had 2 wounds from that one shot. Sergeant Eakes obtained both parents' personal information while he was there at the hospital and spoke with doctors at the ER as well. And when he asked the child what happened, the child said, "I got shot by a gun." The child was then airlifted from the hospital here in Oneonta to Children's Hospital, where he underwent surgery. Thankfully, I can report today that the child is stable. He is still in the hospital at this time, recovering from that surgery. But again, we are just very thankful he's alive and will make a recovery. Both the offenders did agree to come to the sheriff's office when asked and for questioning. They did come to the sheriff's office for an interview, and while they were here, as they were preparing, Sergeant Eakes was preparing to take them back to the investigator or to the room for questioning, the mother did make the statement that she was scared to death of the state of Alabama because she was told that they would take her children from her, and that's precisely what we did. Cassandra's statement made references to where she was during the incident, what she had heard, what she observed when she got inside to where the child was. She did state that they were able to put the belt on him for a tourniquet and load him up and take him to the hospital in their truck. The father's statement, Alex also made similar statements in his about where he was located when he heard the gunshot, and what they did immediately following, and how they loaded him up in the vehicle and took him to the hospital. Investigators were able to obtain 2 search warrants for the residence. Once they were inside the residence, they located several items and several interesting pieces of evidence, and some of those items are a large glass smoking pipe, 1 jar of green leafy substance believed to be marijuana, 1 small red silicone pipe, 17 plastic bags that also held a green leafy substance that's believed to be marijuana, a grinder, 2 glass pipes also for smoking illegal substances, a wooden pipe, 1 small jar with a green leafy substance also believed to be marijuana, a set of scales, which is used for weighing in narcotics, 1 Springfield XD 9mm handgun, 1 Ruger 357 Magnum revolver. Those were located in the area where the children were located, and also several other firearms that were unsecured. Also inside the residence, when the investigators were performing their search warrant, they located several unknown snake species. And even though we don't know exactly what kind they are, we do believe that they all appear to be in the constrictor family. Several of the snakes that they found were deceased. They were covered in maggots, and they were inside the same containers as some of the living snakes. And then there were also several boxes of mice and rats which had chewed through their enclosures and chewed through their boxes, and but they were also located in that same room as the snakes, and we assume that those were for feeding of the snakes because they were being kept in the same place. Another interesting fact is that in the search warrant we found what has been described as either a crocodile or a caiman or an alligator. Regardless of the exact name of that animal, it is not allowed to be owned and kept in a home here in the state of Alabama. Most of the containers in the aquariums that we found that contained these reptiles and animals, they were inside the house. They were inside a restroom. There was a large aquarium that was filled with water that had the alligator, crocodile, whatever you want to call it. It was located in the bathroom. This aquarium was large enough to cover the entire counter inside this restroom. The plastic containers also that contained the snakes and animals, they did not have lids on them. They were just on shelves. But they did have labels on them that we believe to be what their species was. Now, neither I nor my investigators are experts in the field of reptiles, so at this point we just have to kind of go off what was on the label on those containers. The Alabama Department of Conservation, the Wildlife Freshwater Fisheries Division, that's who's handling the investigation regarding the unpermitted animals, as well as taking custody of all those animals that go outside of the scope of the Blount County Animal Control Officer. There are other animals that are still on the scene that my animal control officer will be handling that portion of the investigation, and will take custody of those animals. But the ones that are unlicensed, that will fall under the scope of the Alabama Department of Conservation, the Wildlife Freshwater Fisheries Division. The offenders, or suspects in this case, Alexander Andrew Corey, is charged with aggravated assault, child endangerment, unlawful possession of marijuana in the second degree, unlawful possession of drug paraphernalia, 10 counts of cruelty to animals, as well as 6 counts of failure to bury livestock. Also keep in mind there are potential charges that will be coming from the Alabama Department of Conservation for the other animals. Cassandra Lynn Lutz, she is also charged with aggravated assault, chemical endangerment, unlawful possession of marijuana in the 2nd degree, unlawful possession of drug paraphernalia, 10 counts of cruelty to animals, and 6 counts of failure to bury livestock, and also with the potential to face other charges from the Alabama Department of Conservation and Wildlife Freshwater Fisheries Division for the unpermitted animals. Our victim in this case, 4-year-old that should not have to be dealing with his injuries, first of all, should not have been exposed to the things that these young people, there were 2 children in the home. DHR was notified. They did come and take custody of both children. It was described to me by my investigators that the home that they lived in was unfit for human habitation. Foul odors, as well as the wildlife that was inside the home, the decaying and decomposing dead animals that were inside the home, just was a horrible situation that these young people should not have had to have dealt with. We're saddened for those children, but we are thankful today that, again, that the young child is alive today, and hopefully he'll be placed in a home that will love him and be able to help him to understand this is not normal behavior. Now, like I said, I'll be glad to take questions. Hopefully I can answer some of them. I'll do my very best. So if you have any questions, yes, ma'am.
Are you able to tell us the age and gender of the other child?
It was a younger brother.
So that child's younger than the 4-year-old?
Yes.
I know you mentioned you believe those snakes to be in the constrictor family. Do you and your investigators at this time believe that any of these snakes are venomous?
At this time, we don't believe they are. We were told that there were so many snakes inside these containers that some of them may not require a permit to own, but that is something that the Department of Conservation will investigate and get to the bottom of.
And did the couple tell you guys during the questioning why they had these animals? Did you ask?
They didn't go into that kind of detail. We were more concerned about the criminal investigation and what had happened to the young boy than we were about why they had those animals. Now, we will get to the bottom of, as well as, again, the Department of Conservation will help us get to the bottom of where they came from and how they were able to possess those animals.
And you said there were other animals also that were outside of the
Yes, there's dogs and cats. I believe there's a turkey. There are other different types of animals that are inside a makeshift fence on the property. Those will be things that that my deputy, the Blount County Animal Control Officer, will handle the investigation and taking custody of those animals. He'll handle that. Which, by the way, he's fantastic. We love him to death. We're glad to have him.
And there's several campers or trailers on that property. Were the animals all in the one that they were living in, or were they in?
So all of the animals were in one of the structures, and it is the one that they were living in.
You kind of touched on this briefly, but can you kind of just describe the conditions that were found inside of this home that these kids were living in?
So there was no working restroom. There was, it was very unkempt, and really the best word I guess I can use is nasty. The odor in itself would be one of those things that you would have to grow used to. When you first walk in, it's one of those things that immediately hits you in the face, and you realize that something's wrong. But when you live in those conditions and it's something that you're accustomed to, I would assume that that's something that doesn't hit you when you walk in for the first time. But people who had never been in that house before, like the sheriff's office and folks from my department, it was obvious when they walked in that there was a problem.
You've got these, squalor, it sounds like they were living in squalor. You've got handguns, firearms that weren't secure. You've got animals that can potentially pose a hazard to especially young children. Talk about what it means to your department to be able to get these two children out of this unreal condition.
Yeah, it's a big deal for us to be able to protect life in general. But when you start talking about children and young people, that those hold a very special place in my heart, which is why we've done a lot of the things that we've done here in this department. And so, going back to things like our undercover stings that we do, we have investigators that really love to be involved in that because they know that they are being proactive in the fight against predators who are preying on young children. So to have the opportunity to be able to go in and pull these children out of this extremely unsafe, unfit environment, and prayerfully and hopefully have them placed in a home that will love them and put them in a place of protection and provision, that means the world to every single person that works in this department. That's my understanding, that they are the biological parents.
When you heard the details of this case, what was going through your mind?
So again, I am currently on active military orders, and so when I got the call from my chief deputy that morning telling me that we had a 4-year-old child in the hospital with a gunshot wound, I literally almost threw up, because when you think about, even without knowing the details of the case, I began to think, who would cause this kind of pain to a child? And it brought back memories of, active shooter events in schools and in elementaries. Why would somebody go in and harm these innocent children? So when the chief began to really kind of, and he didn't have all the details at first when he first called me, he just wanted me to be aware of what was going on. So when I spoke to him later in the day and he told me some of the details, it was sickening to even think about anybody living in these types of conditions. But when you start thinking about children who can't do anything outside of what their parents provide, they had no choice, and probably really, if you think about it, if it hadn't have been for this, would have never had any hope of escaping this kind of lifestyle. So even though it's horrific that this young man was wounded, hopefully it'll be a way for the Lord to provide them a place of safety and provision for the rest of their life.
How much time could the offenders face?
That's obviously up to a judge to make that decision on sentencing. We've charged them with as much as we can. Ideally, we would like for them to go away for a long time and never be able to have children ever again. That would be a perfect scenario.
And this was an accidental self-inflicted gunshot wound, or do we know what type?
Yes, it's an accidental self-inflicted. There was a wound to the arm and to a arm and to a leg, where the round went through one shot caused injuries to both the arm and the leg.
And do you know what type of gun?
It was a Springfield XD 9mm handgun that my understanding is possibly was loaded with hollow point rounds.
The parents at any point with that specific gun mention where it could have been to where the child was able to?
They made a statement of where it was at. I'm not going to say, because again, some of the things that they told my investigators were under Miranda, and we'll be using those for our case. The investigator does not necessarily believe that the gun was where they said it was, because there were other unsecured firearms in that same location, same room.
And just for clarification, I know originally it was reported that the parents didn't actually call deputies to come out when the child was shot. Did that call, or did you all find out about that when they got to the hospital?
Yeah, so Doctors and nurses, they are mandatory reporters, and anytime someone comes in with a gunshot wound, they have to notify law enforcement. And that's how we found out, is they called dispatch, and dispatch notified us.
Did they say why they didn't call 911
They did not.
Would you be able to tell us?
I'm trying to be careful.
Sure.
I hope you understand.
Would you be able to tell us at this point where the mother and father were in relation to the home around the time that the child shot themselves?
My understanding is the mother says she was in the kitchen and the father was outside.
And this happened inside the home when the child was shot.
Yes,
And did they take the other child with them to the hospital?
they did. They did take the other child to the hospital with them.
Switching gears to the crocodile caiman, we don't know what it is yet, but it's something in the crocodilia family.
Right.
Hearing that, whenever you were briefed on the situation, did that come as any shock to
Oh.
you that was in Blount County?
Absolutely, it shocked me. You know, there's always been, I'm not even going to say speculation, there's been proof of alligators in Inland Lake. There's a lot of stories about why they're there. I have seen the video of them and pictures of them. But for someone to have one in their home in an aquarium, especially when it's described as a crocodile, not an alligator, that obviously was extremely jarring for me. To number one, why do you have it? Number two, where did it come from? And you know, what do you intend to do with it? Because they lived in a lake area. What happens if this thing gets so large that which you know as well as I do, some of the problems in the Florida Everglades and some of the issues that with animals that are not indigenous to their areas that are causing so much damage and problems, it's because people got these pets, they got to the point where they couldn't care for them, and they released them into an area that they're not supposed to be living in. So if this animal got so large to the point to where they could no longer contain it, chances are they would try to release or would release it into that lake, and it doesn't belong there. And so then it would obviously cause a lot of damage to other wildlife in the area, as well as possibly cause damage to fishers and swimmers and people who live in the area. That's it. Thank you guys for coming out today. I really appreciate it. Just a quick shameless plug. We are having our Sheriff's Office Rodeo this weekend. We're going to have a special needs rodeo Friday for school-age children. And then Friday night we'll have a show. And this year, for the first time, we're having 3 shows. So we're going to have a matinee on Saturday, and then we'll have the night show Saturday night. And really looking forward to that. So you guys come out and enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Have a blessed day.